Marriage is hard, two people having to cooperate to make things work, with a third for those tough days. There's not much to do in the countryside besides your sister, so when prostitutes came to the village, you would expect people to be pretty happy. And they were. They loved sex workers, and also hated them. Let's talk about why that was, and how these women were demonized. There was a certain type of pleasure worker called meshimori onna, or food-serving girl. They worked at rest areas or post stations next to big roads in Edo period Japan. You might want to see the previous video about them if you haven't yet. Men who lived in villages around these places loved them, especially young men who have historically always been bad at keeping their daikons unpeeled. Men would walk to the nearby post station and drop into an inn to talk to one of these hostess girls, and they would go off to a room with her to spend the night, or the hour, depending on how much they liked their wives. Over time, these brothel inns made a bunch of money, but as a famous medieval Japanese rapper once said, "Mo money, mo problemu." Rural communities got really mad at these hostess girls because of one obvious reason and one not so obvious reason that was way more serious. The obvious reason was money. These villages were losing all of it to the brothels. These places catered to both travelers and locals. Travelers were often richer since they had money to travel, or they were government officials. Locals got discounts, but prices were still high. Even so, young local men visited these places like devout monks on pilgrimages, getting enlightened repeatedly. But when they couldn't pay back the money they owed, their families were on the hook for the debt. People who were seriously down bad even sold their fields and their homes. Locals complained that their sons and workers went to these post stations and spent all their money and didn't want to come home. It's hard being a parent. You gotta keep your kids alive, make sure they can pursue their dreams, and make sure their dreams are the correct dreams. Parents in villages near post stations had to worry about another thing, preventing their boys from sleeping with sex workers. Parents went to drastic lengths to control their horny sons. Some shipped their sons off to different villages. One father removed his son from the family's records, basically disowning him. To return, the young man had to write a letter of apology, with a promise to stay away from the station. It was a community effort. In some villages, if a young man was caught at a brothel, they would shave his head and make his family pay a horny tax. Villages had these associations for young men. They were like fraternities. And these fraternities often had rules against visiting brothels. If they caught you, some made you pay a fine, some kicked you out of the group. Over time, all these punishments really made young men think a lot about the consequences of their actions. Mostly, they thought about how to not get caught next time. The good thing about these associations is that they don't stop you from eating Tokyo Treat and Sakura-ko, the sponsor for this video. Hey, I am so sorry. Cancer is so cruel. Jack was a great man. No, he wasn't. He was mean and arrogant. He thought he was so smart because he made it rich, but he just got lucky and put a bunch of money in Bitcoin years ago. Well, you must have really loved him. I couldn't stand him. We hated each other. I was only with him because he promised to leave me his laptop if he ever died, with the security key to his Bitcoin account in it. Oh no, he lied? No, he kept his word. Gave it to me before he died. Oh, well, then why are you so sad? You got what you wanted in the end, didn't you? You're rich. That's the worst part. The Bitcoin bastard played one last trick. He gave me the laptop, just not the password for it. Oh. Well, to cheer you up, I got you a box of Tokyo Treat. It's a service that every month sends you a box of savory and sweet snacks straight from Japan. This month, Tokyo Treat brings you a taste of Osaka, a city known for its food. You get treats inspired by local favorites like mini sugar donuts, yakisoba, and delicious salted caramel Kit Kats. The Kit Kats are always amazing. There's also Sakura-ko, a more premium snack box service. They're not typical treats that you'd find in Japanese convenience stores. You get tasty things like lemon cookies and grape chocolate. This month, you also get kuzuyu, traditional arrowroot tea, and a cute little ceramic plate. Click on the link in the description now and use code Linfamy to get a discount on your first box. You can give it to someone as a gift. People love them. It's important to understand that people didn't think the act of sleeping with a prostitute was especially bad. They just thought it was a huge waste of money. Now you might think that young village men were just out of control and their communities were powerless to stop them. And you'd be right. Even some fraternities held big orgy parties with serving girls and widows of the village. Village leaders blamed serving women for deepening the poverty in their area, but there was a more serious reason why village elders despised serving women and why they demonized them. They thought these ladies were going to destroy their communities, wipe them off the face of the earth as easily as they wiped their customers' business. The threat was 1, cultural, and 2, existential. Little villages in the countryside had their own cultures, different customs, traditions. People lived simpler, more traditional lives. You wake up, eat, sell your baby to a brothel, and sleep. But with the economic boom at the time came big cities that had their own culture. To the older generation in the countryside, city culture was way too much. People living in excess, giving in to all their dirty urges. It's like people from the districts looking at those in the capital, or viewers of Kings and Generals looking at viewers of this channel. All they saw were degenerates. These post stations where the serving women worked were getting richer and building up and started to look like mini cities. That city culture was invading their villages, seducing their children with city values like overspending and forming opinions. A group of 40 or so village leaders once wrote to the authorities complaining about things. And I guess the more things change, the more they stay the same, because it sounded a lot like how older people complain about kids today. They said these youngsters were way too open sexually, and they had no sense of shame, dressing inappropriately and flaunting their intimate relationships. No one wanted to see that. Quote, although men and women used to have an appropriate sense of shame about their sexual relationships, they have forgotten their innate modesty. My dad once told me the same thing about my mom. People living near these brothels slept like a baby, so not at all. These brothels had noisy, obnoxious parties that kept you up all night. Imagine trying to sleep, knowing someone else is having the time of their life. Post stations were looking like red lantern districts from the cities. Their traditional communities were being destroyed. So this is how it ends, they thought. Not with a bang, but with a So that was the first threat. Threat number 2 from prostitution was existential. It could literally destroy their communities and leave nothing left. How? Freedom. Freedom was a dirty word. There's this letter from 1842 that explains it, written by some village elders to the authorities. They complained about this region known for cotton weaving. Women from all over the place moved there to work as cotton weavers. It was good, honest work, very respectable, and very underpaid compared to what the prostitutes in that area were making. Soon after arriving, many women started selling their bodies and getting rich. Money talks. In this case, it moans. The letter complained that women of their villages saw prostitutes buying fancy clothes and jewelry and makeup, and they couldn't wait to leave their fields and move there to try their luck. For most people, money can't buy happiness because they just don't have enough money yet to afford it. Villages panicked, seeing their young people moving out, leaving their communities to die. Financial freedom for women was a huge threat. And because of the prostitution thing, they tied financial freedom with sexual freedom. Also, economic independence meant that women could defy the authority of their fathers and husbands. It was a threat to an orderly household, and since the household was the foundation for rural Japanese communities, it threatened their whole way of life. Hostess girls were a symbol of all the things leading to the destruction of their village: women working outside the household, moving between provinces, and selling sex. Since most serving girls were taken from faraway provinces, it was more proof that outsiders were coming in and ruining their communities. Now, the truth was, people in the countryside were fighting against a force much stronger than they could have imagined: the market. You see, in the Edo period, the times they were a-changin'. Japan's economy was a-growin', and more people were participating in the market. Not just women, men too. Young men and women were giving up agriculture to go find better opportunities elsewhere. It made sense. Anyone would rather go to New York City than stay in Pierre, South Dakota. How do I know? Everyone knows how to pronounce New York City, but you didn't even know that this is pronounced Pierre instead of Pierre, did you? Even the pronunciation left town. The whole prostitution industrial complex was super abusive, but this was another side to it. There were women who willingly went into it, seeing it as an escape from poverty. The market was impossible to stop. Much easier to demonize serving girls instead. In the countryside, there was this stereotype of serving girls being terrible, wicked women. There was a case of one man who was trying to divorce his wife, but his wife's relatives complained to the village elders that he shouldn't be allowed to do that because he planned to marry a serving girl afterwards. Say it ain't so. The elders actually called the husband in for questioning. He was like, no, I'm not going to marry that type of woman. In the end, they allowed the divorce, but only because he promised not to take a wicked second wife, meaning a serving woman. That remarrying a hostess was a valid reason for vetoing a divorce shows what people thought of hostesses. Remember, this wasn't a Christian worldview of sex outside marriage being sinful. The problem, they thought, was that sexual freedom and economic freedom threatened the cohesiveness of the household. Even so, plenty of serving girls got married after they retired. People just couldn't resist. It didn't prevent others from trying to stop it, though. There was a belief that you shouldn't marry such a woman because they would have unhealthy children, and people blamed them for a population decline. We're not sure if they meant the women were infertile because of STDs or because they were addicted to contraception and abortion. Now, some of the accusations from haters were honestly kind of true. They said these prostitutes caused young men to devalue the young women of the village. That did seem to be the case, at least sometimes. One guy wrote, "Prostitutes are sophisticated and seductive, not at all like the village types." That guy was not popular at the weekly sewing meetups. Village elders thought serving ladies had a big influence on the minds of young girls, more of that urban culture invading the village. This was also kind of true. Serving girls came from other regions mostly, so they brought their own culture with them, like songs and stories, sharing different values with the village girls. And just like fancy courtesans in the cities, hostesses were considered sophisticated and fashionable. Village girls looked up to them. They envied their fancy clothing and copied their hairstyles. Even older women would ask for their help when dressing up for festivals because they kept up with the latest trends. For village leaders who saw all this urban corruption destroying their communities, it's not surprising that they would demonize these prostitutes. It was also sad for the women themselves. Many were pushed into prostitution contracts at a young age by their parents. Many had to move far away. At least in their hometowns, they were seen as good daughters doing their duty to help their families survive. But at these post stations, they were often smeared as wicked women destroying rural society. Things were totally different in the cities, though. It was an honor and privilege to be able to meet a top courtesan. And even if you had the money, there was a whole ritual you had to go through to be able to slip into the bed of a courtesan. Click here to see the super frustrating steps it took to see one of these high-class prostitutes. We have some new patrons on YouTube and Patreon today. Trixie with a flower, Kareem Hepburn, Ned Sturman, and DeWills 1991. You guys are amazing. All right, I love you and spread the knowledge.